Our topic for today is how to find lasting freedom in spiritual stillness. Guy, would you like to start with some opening remarks?
It seems sometimes a difficult marriage, the idea of freedom and stillness. But I want to show, as best I can, a few different ideas before we start taking the questions and all of that. When we examine the idea of freedom, what is it that stirs in us the wish, even the thought of being a free human being? Does a free human being think about being a free human being?
Right, no.
So the whole reason that the idea of freedom even passes through the mind, let alone the pursuits that are described by the mind that asks the question, is that I'm not free.
Right.
Something, it's yet to be determined what it is. Hopefully we'll get a little closer to it today. Something holds me as a captive. For the majority of our life, for the majority of a human being's life, the sense of captivity is the way in which the mind in its fancy basically conjures up all of the different problems that a person faces in life. Personal relationships that didn't work out, promises I made to myself I didn't keep, persistent nagging, compulsive behavior that was somehow beyond my ability to control, a terrible social, cultural, religious, governmental oversight that's got me locked into something. All of that a man or a woman can spend their whole life, and actually do, not just fighting to try to control the conditions around them so as to escape the sense of being a captive produced by the way the mind imagines the relationship between themselves and their guards, their captives. But then a person can pursue through time just an endless series of promises that if I could just get to the end of this particular problem, I would be free.
Right.
So the idea of freedom, real freedom, has to be understood as an inside job. Everybody knows, and ought to at least in some way by now, that you have felt under the yoke of something. How many times? The yoke of a financial burden, the yoke of a relationship strain, the yoke of people not doing what you want them to do when you want them to do it, whatever it may be. And you can get some of that worked out, and you do, because your life is basically dedicated to getting people and conditions under your control. But no more do you accomplish any of that than does some subtle aspect or not so subtle aspect of that condition change. And the next thing you know, you're back under the yoke again of this condition. So I want to go at this idea of freedom from a completely different angle. I want you to at least consider, and see, I wasn't even going to really talk much for the first bit here, but do you know that you can't even begin to consider the truth of yourself until you're free from your own considerations? Everything that you hear is met with a mind that is replete with all of the content that is part and parcel with the captivity you're trying to escape. But we don't think that. We don't think, I'm not free to think freely. You can't have an opinion and be free to think freely. To be able to be free to think freely begins with seeing the captivity of the thinker.
Right.
Doesn't it? I want to think in a direction like this, and I start to think, I'm gonna really make an effort. And in comes this wave of thoughts and feelings telling me, well, you've been down that road, or you do know that already. You just haven't properly applied what you know. And then you're buried under an avalanche of habitual thoughts and feelings, every last one of them basically consoling you at one point and then controlling you so that you don't investigate any further the nature of that unconscious relationship between the thinker and the thought that seem to be different. As opposed to, because I want to get to questions, another kind of freedom, freedom without an object.
Without an object.
Freedom without an object. For us, freedom is always in an object. I get this, I become that, I do this, I don't do that. So that there's always a relationship between myself and something that my mind has formulated as being a necessity to achieve freedom. Freedom has no object. And here's how you can see this for yourself, if you wish to. When you are outside on a beautiful day, maybe you're walking, or maybe you're with someone, like for me, just ever so quickly, where I live, we have 4 brand new fawns. A 4th one showed up today. Mm-hmm. Tammy's had twins. Sarah, the runt of the old litter, has the runt of the litter now, and Annie. So I got 4 babies. Now, I've worked with these deer over all these years so that they don't run when I come outside. And now the babies don't run. They're willing to stand right there at my feet while the mother eats what she does that I give her. I can't possibly experience inwardly certain conditions that exist outwardly when I'm out there aware of the fawns and of myself. But I do know that the more quiet I can be in the presence of this very perfectly innocent form of nature, the more profound the interaction is between us, so that we can actually look at each other. I make eye contact with a fawn. They're so conditioned as animals to fear human beings. So the more quiet I become, the more essential becomes the communion between myself and the creature. Mm-hmm. The more essential the relationship between the observer and the observed, the less distance there is between the two of us. So that there's not a question of me thinking towards the creature or of it reacting necessarily to me, anything apart from what it would call natural. And in that communion, there is a certain set of conditions that take place where the individual, and you have to see this from your own work, the relationship becomes more and more deep. It becomes more and more tactile. And in that, all the longing to own something, be something, go somewhere, do something, all of that disappears. And that means essentially that in that moment, we're just taking an example, there is a kind of freedom that has no object in it in that moment. The freedom is the relationship that's born in that split second between 2 consenting parties, between a human being that can be conscious of himself and a fawn that has no say in it, but that is the essential expression of certain very tender things in nature. In that communion is freedom. It's freedom because there's no one there wanting anything from the moment other than just to be a part of it. That's all that's interesting. That's all that's meaningful in such a moment, is just the most profound way that you can attend to that moment is the same as the most profound freedom that can be taken from it. This is why there's freedom in spiritual stillness. Because in stillness, the difference between the observer and the observed disappears. When the distance and the difference disappears, there's no observer thinking it wants something or doesn't want something from what it observes. And as that collapses, lo and behold, the idea of wanting or not wanting anything just goes away. Right. And what is it that I am a captive of in the end? I don't want the government.
Right.
I do want him.
Right.
I don't want her. I need more of this. That's not enough. This is too much. Every last part of it born out of a mind that can only compare itself to something in order to ultimately console itself or find some way to figure out how to control what it doesn't like. So there's no freedom that way. But it just takes a darn long time to begin to even suspect the way in which I am complicit in my own captivity. And then the self that feels captured by that body of desire that doesn't know it's divided in twain, then it goes on its lifelong search of trying to fix him and fix that as an attempt to get free, when freedom doesn't exist through any of that motion. None of that behavior can ever produce freedom, ever. And that's the secret freedom in spiritual stillness, is that there is a unity that we are created to be involved in, and in unity there's no pursuit of anything to enlarge it.
Right.
Or protect it.
Yeah, so freedom from the nature that wants, because the nature that wants can only be separated from what it wants.
That's exactly it.
And create time.
That's it. And it is an endless cycle. It is reincarnation itself. It is the repetition of a level of nature that seeks a solution to its own divided state through things outside of itself. And whatever it finds makes and confirms the nature involved in that. And it just goes on.